tonight we had surprising results coming in. People thought that there was going to be what the Republicans called a red wave, but I thought there was going to be a little bit of a surge based on the polling, obviously, for the Republicans. I wouldn't have called it a wave, but a surge. And I was pretty angry with how Democrats had run the race. And I'm sticking with most of that. But now it appears the Democrats have done better than expected, for sure. And they certainly picked up a seat in Pennsylvania with Fetterman, and they ran closer in a lot of races and won more convincingly in races that we thought were going to be close. So no question the Democrats did better tonight than almost anyone expected, and more than I expected. So then you get to why. Why did they do better? So one possibility is maybe they ran a great race and we were just wrong about it. I would be very surprised by that. But there is some element of that, and we've talked about that throughout the night, and different strategies that might have worked better than people expected. For example, Michael made the point about abortion polling at #1 issue in Pennsylvania. So there was a lot of critique of the Democrats focusing too much on that issue, but maybe it helped them win what was a close race for the Senate seat in Pennsylvania. So give credit where credit is due. Democrats might have run a better race than we realized. Okay, but I think there are a couple of factors that are more important. One is Donald Trump's candidates sucked, right? So even J.D. Vance, who won in Ohio, did not win by as much as expected. Ohio is about +10. He won by about +7. Not a big difference, but he underperformed expectations. The rest were horrible. Bolduc got annihilated in New Hampshire. Mastriano annihilated in the governor's race in Pennsylvania. The Maryland and Massachusetts had Republican governors. The two Trumpies that ran in those states just mauled, lost by giant margins. And wherever you went, there was a clown Trump pick that turned into anywhere from a loss to a disaster. By the way, Dr. Oz, not as extreme as Mastriano and Bolduc, etc., but he was picked by Trump. And Trump's like, oh, he's a celebrity. Oh, people love celebrities, right? And so he also lost. And in a seat that certainly could have been won, especially given that Fetterman had the stroke. So now the Carrie Lake is not in, but she's losing significantly as we speak now. So if she also loses, it's a terrible night for Trump. And his Achilles heel is his only issue in a Republican primary. Otherwise, he's the Republicans' messiah. They love him, and they're going to vote for him no matter what. If he starts insulting DeSantis, DeSantis is going to run for the hills, etc. But his one Achilles heel is electability. So in an ironic way, he called Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, and Joe Biden's poll numbers are not good. But Joe Biden did beat Donald Trump. And I think that Republicans today are going to be thinking, well, I mean, he already lost to Biden, right? And Biden's not the world's most dynamic candidate. And now all of his picks were just disasters across the country. Maybe this guy can't win a presidential election. And that would be the only way he could lose a Republican primary. And that would be great news for the country. I'm not in the camp of run the craziest Republican and cross your fingers and hope we don't lose democracy the next time around. No, I want Trump to lose very, very badly. And so I think that's great. And then finally, vote for sanity tonight. A lot of the crazy candidates got blown out. And it was wherever you saw someone who was a regular Republican, they did relatively well. Whenever you saw an insane Republican who said, no, Joe Biden didn't really win the 2020 election, or whatever other conspiracy theories that they had, they did very, very poorly. So apparently the country's a little bit more sane than we realized, which is a giant relief.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is I have to point out that Fetterman winning is showing that running on a progressive message works. Because look at Mandela Barnes. Mandela Barnes, during the primary, was talking a little bit about Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage. But as soon as he got close to having the establishment endorsement from the Democratic Party and being favored by them, he started to waver on that messaging. And he carried on with that throughout the general election, was not an advocate for Medicare for all, was not talking a lot about raising wages and doing big progressive policies like Fetterman was talking about. And look at where that's put him, in a position where it looks like he could very well lose to Ron Johnson. And so I think there's a lot of lessons here. One would be investing in having more polling locations in a place like Milwaukee, where there's a larger population, but for some reason, year over year, Madison outnumbers them with polling locations. So just really sad. I mean, Milwaukee's also a city with far more people of color. That's disenfranchisement. And so the Democrats really need to invest in long-term infrastructure in our elections. On top of that, they really need to realize that if they run progressives who talk about progressive policies, they will win.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick to that. We talked about it earlier in the night, but both Tim Ryan and John Fetterman ran arguably populist campaigns, but only one of them ran a populist and progressive campaign, and that was Fetterman. So the populist campaign, I think, made a little bit of a difference for Tim Ryan. He outperformed what were the Democratic numbers in Ohio, but he didn't get as close as we had hoped. Whereas Fetterman, running the populist and progressive campaign, won, picked up a Republican seat, and he had a stroke. So when you look at the totality of how Barnes, Fetterman, and Ryan ran, to me, you get the results that you run progressive, you run populist, but especially on economic issues.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is that Fetterman had already won statewide and Tim Ryan hadn't. And I think that does make a difference. And there's a difference between Pennsylvania and Ohio. Western Pennsylvania is where he's from, is where John Fetterman's from. And that's generally a Republican stronghold place. He was the former mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania. That Allegheny County is a Democratic stronghold. So he was able to appeal in ways that even Biden wasn't able to appeal. And Biden was probably put over the finish line by Allegheny County. So they are two different states. And I'm not discounting what you're saying. But I do think that Tim Ryan, I just feel like Ohio is a red state and Pennsylvania is a blue state, and even Russ Feingold was 0 for 2 against Ron Johnson. So it's hard to say where any of these people went wrong in states that could go either way generally, with the exception of Ohio, which until we hear otherwise is a red state, the same way that Florida is. One ironic part of tonight, Cenk and Jessica, is that if the Democrats don't hold the House, it will be because of New York. And New York and all of the Biden districts that the Republicans were targeting, they're doing very, very well right now with a lot of that vote counted. So you're looking at upstate New York, western New York, you're looking downstate in Sean Patrick Maloney's. None of them have been called yet, but they're all trending toward the Republicans. And it would be a really ironic turn if New York is the state that gives the House to the Republicans.
Well, I'd be very curious about the exit polling out of New York as to what drove that. And crime is a possibility. We don't know that yet, but it is a possibility. So final thoughts are, this is less about Trump and more about the sanity point. Boebert's losing right now. So if she does wind up losing in a very Republican district, that's a giant positive sign for sanity in the country. And as we sign off here, Georgia's almost definitely going to a runoff, because now Warnock's lead number is 49.37. It's dropped a little bit with over 95% reporting. So it's going to be very difficult for him to get past the 50% numbering and avoid the runoff. So if you liked these elections, don't worry. There's more ahead.